You have been forgiving people who have not earned it, and every time you do, you teach them exactly how to treat you next time. Forgiveness is one of the most powerful things a man can offer, which is exactly why giving it freely to anyone who asks for anything they do destroys the thing that makes it powerful. Think about the person in your life who keeps doing the same thing, the same lie, the same boundary crossed, the same disrespect in slightly different form, and every time you forgive. Every time they learn the same lesson, that there is no consequence. Here's a real example. A friend borrows money and is late repaying. You forgive it. You say nothing. 6 months later, they ask again. You lend again. They are late again. You have not been a good friend. You have been a bad teacher. You taught them that borrowing from you has no real cost. This is not about becoming cruel. This is about understanding that forgiveness without consequence is not kindness, it is permission, and permission repeated becomes precedent. Machiavelli watched this dynamic destroy men at the highest levels of power. Princes who forgave too easily were not respected. They were tested again and again by people who correctly read the forgiveness as an absence of boundary rather than a presence of grace. Today, you are going to understand the difference between forgiveness that commands respect and forgiveness that invites exploitation, between releasing the anger, which is for you, and removing the consequence, which is for them.
This knowledge is for protection, not hardness. You are not learning to become unforgiving. You are learning to make your forgiveness mean something. Because forgiveness that costs nothing produces nothing. Machiavelli's warning was precise. The man who forgives without condition teaches others that conditions do not exist, and a man with no conditions has no respect. Not because he is weak in character, because he has communicated weakness in standard. Stay with me, because what follows will permanently change how you give, withhold, and communicate forgiveness, and what that communication produces in every relationship you have. Here is what you were taught. Forgive and forget. Turn the other cheek. Holding on to anger only hurts you. Be the bigger person. These are not wrong, but they are incomplete in a way that has made you a target. The missing distinction: forgiving someone in your heart is a private act that protects your peace. Removing all consequence from their behavior is a public act that shapes their future behavior. These are two completely different things. You have been doing both at once, every time. You can forgive someone completely, release the anger, wish them well, hold no bitterness, and still maintain the consequence of their behavior. Those two things are not in conflict. In fact, separating them is the most mature thing you can do. You have been collapsing these two things because you were taught that maintaining a consequence means you have not truly forgiven. That is not true. It is a confusion that has been used to manipulate forgiving people for centuries. People who benefit from your indiscriminate forgiveness have a strong interest in you believing that real forgiveness requires consequence removal. They are wrong, and they know they are wrong. The argument is not philosophical, it is strategic. This knowledge is for protection, not hardness. You are not learning to become cold or punitive. You are learning to protect the value of your forgiveness so that when you give it, it means something real to both of you. Respect is not given. It is communicated through what you will and will not accept. Every time you forgive without condition, you communicate that there is no floor to what you will accept, and people, consciously or not, will keep testing to find the floor that does not exist. Machiavelli understood this as one of the most reliable mechanisms of respect loss. Not dramatic betrayal, not open disrespect. Simply a man with no visible standard slowly loses the room's regard, because the room cannot respect what it cannot find. The solution is not withholding forgiveness, it is separating forgiveness from consequence. forgiving fully internally, and communicating the consequence clearly externally. Both complete, neither compromising the other. 6 lessons. Each one will give you a specific tool for making your forgiveness mean what it was always meant to mean, without making you bitter, hard, or closed.
Niccolo Machiavelli watched forgiveness destroy men who had every other advantage, men of genuine capability, genuine character, who lost the room's respect not through failure, but through an excess of mercy that communicated an absence of standard. He documented this in The Prince with a precision that has never been surpassed. He was not writing against forgiveness, he was writing against the confusion of forgiveness with the removal of all standard. That confusion, he observed, was fatal to respect every single time. He wrote, verified from The Prince, chapter 8, "Injuries should be done all at once, so that being tasted less, they offend less." He was not prescribing cruelty, he was documenting that half measures in either direction produce the worst outcomes. Incomplete forgiveness, incomplete consequence, both leave the situation unresolved and the respect uncertain. What he meant, do not half punish and half forgive. Do not leave situations in permanent ambiguity. Decide, forgive completely or address the consequence completely. The half measure satisfies nobody, resolves nothing, and communicates only uncertainty about your own standard. 6 lessons drawn from his observations on respect, forgiveness, and the precise communication of standard. Each one will give you a specific, usable tool for this week, not a philosophy for some day. At least one of these will describe a relationship in your life right now. Pay attention to which one. Lesson 1. Forgive completely on the inside. Maintain the consequence clearly on the outside. These are 2 separate acts. Do both. Compromise neither. Internal forgiveness is about you. It releases the anger, the resentment, the weight of carrying what someone did to you. You do this for yourself, not for them, and it has nothing to do with whether the consequence stands. External consequence is about them. It communicates your standard, what is and is not acceptable in how you are treated. You do this for the relationship and for your own self-respect. It has nothing to do with whether you have forgiven internally. Starting today, the next time someone does something that requires forgiveness, ask 2 separate questions. 1. Have I released this internally? 2. Have I communicated the consequence externally? Both questions, both answers, neither skipped. Machiavelli observed that the princes who were most respected were those whose internal generosity and external standard were both visible and both complete. The room knew they would be forgiven. The room also knew there would be a consequence. That combination produced genuine respect. Lesson 2. Every act of forgiveness is a lesson delivered to the person being forgiven. The question is not whether you are teaching, you always are. The question is what you are teaching. Forgiveness without consequence teaches what you did had no real cost. Do it again if you want. Forgiveness with a maintained consequence teaches I release the anger and I maintain the standard. Both can coexist. One of these lessons builds the relationship, the other slowly destroys it. Starting today, before you forgive, decide what lesson you are delivering. Not what you feel, what the other person will learn from how you respond. Because they will learn something. The only choice is what. Here's a real example. A partner consistently arrives late to important events. You forgive each time without comment. What have you taught? That your important events are not important enough to be on time for. Not because they decided that, because you taught it through unconditioned forgiveness repeated enough times to become the rule. Machiavelli noted that the most effective teachers of standard were those whose consistency was legible. The room knew what would and would not be accepted, because the response to both was clear and predictable. Predictability of standard is the foundation of respect. Lesson 3.
Respect cannot exist where there is no visible standard. You cannot respect a man whose limit you cannot find. Not because he is bad, because he has not communicated what he is. This is counterintuitive. You might think that having no limits makes you easy to be around. It does, and easy to be around very quickly becomes easy to dismiss. The man with no visible standard becomes invisible in the most specific way. His presence registers, but his weight does not. The man with a clear standard, who people know will respond in a predictable way to specific behaviors, commands a different quality of attention. Not fear, weight. The room adjusts when he is in it because his presence carries information about what is and is not acceptable. Starting today, identify one standard you have been holding privately but not communicating externally. Not dramatically, simply clearly. The standard exists in you. Make it legible to the room. Machiavelli's most respected princes were not the most feared, they were the most legible. The room understood them, knew their standard, knew what would and would not be accepted. That understanding, that legibility, was the foundation of durable respect. Lesson 4. There is a precise and important distinction between forgiving a person and accepting a behavior. You can do the first completely without doing the second at all. In fact, doing the first without the second is the most sophisticated form of forgiveness available. When you collapse person and behavior, when you treat addressing the behavior as an attack on the person, you create an impossible choice: either accept the behavior or reject the person. Most forgiving people choose to accept the behavior rather than risk rejecting the person. That is the trap. The distinction frees you. You can say completely genuinely, "I care about you deeply, I value this relationship, and this specific behavior is not acceptable and must change." All three are true simultaneously. None cancels the others. Starting today, when something requires addressing, separate the person from the behavior explicitly. In your own mind first, then in the conversation. Make it clear that your forgiveness of them is complete and your address of the behavior is separate. Both are true. Say both. Here is a real example. A colleague takes credit for your work. You can forgive the colleague completely, release the anger, maintain the relationship, and still address the behavior clearly, not as punishment, as standard setting. One conversation, both complete. Lesson 5. Immediate forgiveness, before the other person has sat with what they did, communicates that what they did was not serious enough to require reflection. Timed forgiveness, given after the consequence has been felt, communicates that it was. The timing is part of the message. This is not about withholding forgiveness as punishment. It is about recognizing that forgiveness given before the other person has understood the weight of what they did cannot produce genuine repair. It produces relief. Relief is not the same as repair. Starting today, when something serious happens, do not rush to forgive to ease the discomfort in the room. Let the discomfort be present for a moment, not forever, just long enough for the weight of what happened to be genuinely felt by both parties. Immediate forgiveness of serious things communicates that they were not serious. You may intend grace, the other person receives permission. The gap between your intention and their reception is where respect gets lost, quietly, incrementally, permanently. Machiavelli observed that the most respected figures were those whose forgiveness, when it came, carried the weight of genuine deliberation. The room knew the forgiveness had been considered. That consideration made it meaningful. Meaningful forgiveness changes behavior. Automatic forgiveness does not. Lesson 6. The ultimate answer to the forgiveness problem is to build relationships where forgiveness is rarely required.
Not because people are perfect, because the standard has been communicated clearly enough that most people respect it most of the time. Relationships built on clearly communicated mutual standards require far less forgiveness than relationships built on unstated expectations and accumulated resentments. The standard does not prevent connection, it enables it. People relax around someone whose standard they understand. Starting today, identify one relationship where forgiveness is required too frequently. Ask, have I communicated my standard clearly in this relationship, or have I been assuming they would figure it out? If the answer is the second, that's your starting point. Here is a real example. Two friends. One constantly forgives small disrespects without comment. The relationship requires frequent forgiveness and produces low-grade resentment. The other communicates clearly once, "This is what I need in a friendship," and rarely requires forgiveness afterward. Same friendship potential, entirely different outcomes. One communicated, one did not. Machiavelli's most enduring relationships, those that survived exile, political reversals, the loss of everything, were built on clearly stated mutual loyalty and clearly understood mutual expectation. Not assumption, not hope, clarity. That clarity was what endured.
The old pattern is finished. The version of you that forgave without condition and wondered why the same thing kept happening, that rushed to ease the discomfort before the weight of what happened could be felt, that collapsed the person and the behavior and created impossible choices. That man had the right impulse. He just needed the complete tool. Now, he has it. You are a weapon pointed at your own future. A man whose forgiveness is complete on the inside and clear on the outside is one of the rarest things available in any relationship, because he offers genuine warmth without producing confusion about his standard. People can relax with him and respect him simultaneously. That combination is almost impossible to find. You belong to no one, not to the discomfort that rushed you into premature forgiveness, not to the confusion that collapsed person and behavior into an impossible choice, not to the pattern that kept teaching the wrong lesson. From here, your forgiveness is chosen, deliberate, yours. Machiavelli's final observation on this: the man who is known to forgive thoughtfully, who people know will forgive genuinely when forgiveness is earned, is respected in a way that the man who forgives automatically never is, because his forgiveness means something, and meaning is the foundation of respect. That meaning is what your forgiveness now carries. Use it well. If this reached you, it reached you because there is someone in your life whose behavior you have been forgiving without consequence, and some part of you has known for a long time that the pattern is not working. Today, that part of you has a tool. Subscribe if you are building relationships where your forgiveness means something. This channel is for men who want to be both genuinely warm and genuinely respected, and who refuse to believe those two things are in conflict. The Machiavelli series ends here. 10 videos, 10 mechanisms, 10 things the room has been doing that you can now read. The next philosopher arrives next week. Be here, warm, clear, both, because that is the only version of you that the right people will fully trust and the wrong people will fully respect. Before you go, one question. Think of one relationship where you have been forgiving too easily, where the same thing keeps happening. What is the one thing you have not yet said, the standard you have not yet communicated? Drop it below. You do not have to name the person.